everyone, and welcome back to Ontario Cryptids. I'm going to try a different format today, so let me know if you prefer less chatter at the beginning. If you have an encounter story that you would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story with like-minded people. Now sit back and relax as we begin with today's encounters. This first encounter was published on Friday, May the 5th of 1871 in the Jackson, Tennessee Whig newspaper. This was later republished in the Hagerstown Mail. The Jackson, Tennessee Whig newspaper of the 13th instance says, "We learned that between Sabi and Cranesville on what is called Piney in McNairy County, Tennessee, a strange and frightful being has been observed for several weeks. He is said to be 7 feet in height and possesses a great muscular power. His eyes are unusually large and fiery red. His hair hangs in a tangled, matted mass below his waist, and his beard reaches below his middle. His entire body is covered with hair, and his whole aspect is most frightful. He shuns the sight of them, but approaches with wild and horrid screams of delight every woman who is unaccompanied by a man. He sometimes with great caution approaches houses, and should he see a man, he runs away with astonishing swiftness, leaping the tallest fences with ease of a deer, defying alike the pursuit of men and dogs. He has frightened several women by attempting to carry them off, as well as by his horrid aspect, and the whole country around Sabi is in consternation. The citizens are now scouring the woods and are determined either to capture or drive off the monster." This one is a newspaper clipping posted by Okla the Muck. It is dated August the 1st of 1883, although it doesn't state the specific newspaper which it was printed in. The article is titled "Man or Gorilla? The Extraordinary Character Who is Scaring Canucks." Ottawa, Ontario, August the 1st. Pembroke, about 100 miles north of Ottawa, has a lively sensation in the shape of a wild man 8 feet high and covered with hair. His haunts are on Purdy's Island, a short distance from the town, and the people are so terrified that no one has dared to venture on the island for several weeks. 2 raftsmen named Tuffy and Salmon, armed with weapons, plucked up sufficient courage to scour the woods in hopes of seeing the monster. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, their curiosity was rewarded. He emerged from a thicket having in one hand a tomahawk made of stone and in the other a bludgeon. His appearance struck such terror to the hearts of the raftsmen that they made tracks for the boat which was moored by the beach. The giant followed them, uttering demoniacal yells and gesticulating wildly. They had barely time to get into the boat and pull a short distance out into the stream when he hurled the tomahawk after them, striking Tuffy in the arm and fracturing it. Salmon fired 2 shots, but neither took effect, the giant retreating hurriedly at the first sound of firearms. It is more than probable that the townspeople will arrange an expedition to capture, if possible, what Tuffy describes as a man who looks like a gorilla wandering about in perfect nude condition and with the exception of the face completely covered with thick growth of black hair. This next one takes place in Franklin County, New York, on October the 25th of 2022. The nearest town is Gabriel, New York. On our way back to Paul Smith's College from our dendrology lab, I noticed a large figure out in the window by the power lines. At first, I thought it was a large man in a fur coat because I could see its arms, legs, head, and torso. But this creature was much too big to be a man, and the fur seemed to be covering its entire body. It was about 1/3 the size of the telephone poles, about 30 feet poles, that made up the power lines and was walking enough for me to have a good comparison. That would make this thing about 8 to 10 feet tall, roughly speaking. It had its back to me and seemed to be casually strolling north along the path the power lines went. It was moving slow and didn't seem spooked by any of the traffic on the road, but it was a good 100 to 125 yards down the power lines, so maybe that's why it wasn't spooked. Okay, the last one occurred on October the 26th of 2022. We're going to El Dorado County, California, and the nearest towns are Coloma and Lotus. I was very hesitant to make a report, but was encouraged by a friend. So here it is. I am an avid equestrian. I am now in my 60s and ride strictly for relaxation. I trail ride 4 to 5 days a week. The area I ride is a large rec area called Cronan Ranch. It is strictly for bikes, horses, and hiking with miles and miles of trails. No motorized vehicles allowed. The American River borders the rec area. When I ride, I almost always go by the river to give my horses a drink. For hikers, day walkers, this particular river access point is the closest to the Pedro Hill Trailhead parking lot, but still a long walk to the river, with the return being all uphill. In the summer, you will almost always find people at this access point enjoying the river. There has been, since I have been riding here, over the last 3 years, a picnic area with several large heavy-duty wooden picnic benches. It is an awesome spot with shade and pit toilets nearby the tables, but it is a tough trek for the average person who might not be fit or small children. I often ride alone with my dog, and lately I bring my other horses along to get exercise. I pony lead him while riding my horse. Because I'm older and ride alone so much, I try to be very aware of my surroundings for both predator animals such as bear and lions, but also human predators. The latter is not a strong issue here, but still wise to be aware. On this particular day, I went out later in the morning than I normally do, getting to the trail around noon. There were a few hikers coming back to their cars, but very few people and cars around this time of the day. I rode for about 6 miles and did not see another person the entire ride, which is somewhat unusual. I rode to the river to my favorite point for my horses to get a drink where the bank is less rocky. After the horses watered, I decided to go over to the picnic area to take some photos. I had brought some new camera equipment that I wanted to experiment with, and I thought I would use the table to set up my tripod. To my surprise, the tables had all been removed. I honestly don't know if this is significant to the story or not, but it struck me as very strange because it would have been quite a monumental task to remove these very heavy tables. So I stood there just letting the horses rest while I took just a couple of pictures with my phone. The first pic I will post will be a picture I took looking towards the river. You will notice the 2 large trees with the gap looking towards the river. The river is hard to see as there is a small hill mound between me and the river. This photo is strictly for reference. After taking the photo, I put my phone away and prepared to head back. I had abandoned the idea of trying the new equipment. As I still stood there facing the river, some movement caught my eye and I turned my eyes towards the movement. What I saw was something that was obviously darting into some cover to avoid being seen. I caught only a quick glimpse, but the part of the body was the buttocks and leg as it ran and ducked. It appeared to be reddish-brown in color. As we all know, our minds are very capable of quickly assessing what our eyes see, or at least attempting to. My first impression was, oh, it's someone down at the river, possibly skinny dipping, who didn't know I was there. The reason I thought it was a person was the movement. It appeared to be upright and moved and acted like a person wanting not to be seen. However, I quickly reminded myself it was dark reddish-brown, so not likely naked, especially with the water in the 40-degree range. Let me say this, I couldn't say the reddish-brown was hair. I do not see details like that at that distance to say definitely. So my next thought was, oh, it must have been a bear. Now, from the time I saw this thing and all these thoughts went through my head was only seconds, maybe a split second before what happened next. I had only caught this glimpse of whatever it was, and that was it. I would have rode on and never thought about it again, but within a second of jumping into this cover, which consisted of some low tree branches and brush, I saw a small group of trees that suddenly began violently shaking. The branches or trunks were being pushed back and forth, crossing each other by a good 4 feet, and again violently being shook. As I stood there watching in shock and wondering what the hell was that, I decided to ride up to the trail that paralleled the spot to get a higher point to see if I could figure out what it was. I kept my eyes peeled for any movement. The area had bushes and large rocks, but I knew if this was a bear, the area was open enough that I would eventually catch sight of him. It is unusual behavior for a bear to climb a tree for safety, and most bears do not wish to share space with humans. They normally just run or walk away. They do not normally crouch down and hide. So my thought was still that this could still be a bear. After all, Bigfoot is not and should not be anyone's first thought, and it wasn't mine. However, when I could not see any sign of anything, I was totally mystified and thought that I might backtrack to get closer to the spot and see if anyone or anything was hiding. Because whatever it was, I felt was hiding. But since I was alone and unarmed, I decided to just leave. The more I contemplating what I saw, the more mystified I was. I came home and told my husband the story, and he was also shocked and mystified. So I decided that I would go back the next day and see if I could see any evidence that might explain what I saw. The area, as I mentioned before, was very rocky, and even my horse at over 1,000 pounds did not leave much of a track, if any. So I wasn't really expected to see tracks. But to my surprise, there was a somewhat sandy area near the sighting, and I noticed a footprint that had distinct toes. My first thought was that it was likely a human footprint because this was a popular area, and despite the cooler weather and very cold water, someone might have taken off their shoes, but decided to get down and take a closer look. To my shock, the footprint was much larger than my boot. While not very wide, it was dramatically bigger than mine. I wear a size 9 women's, and I was also wearing boots, which are bigger yet. I took a photo, but unfortunately photos often do not justify to the definition that I could see with the naked eye. After finding the footprint, I proceeded to the area where the trees was where it darted into. What shocked me the most was the tree. What I thought was a group of trees was actually one tree. The diameter of the base was at least a foot or more. The tree had at some point, due to what appears high water levels during a record storm, been underwater. The water had sheared off the top at about the 12-foot level. After the water receded, the tree recovered and grew new branches. It was these branches that were being violently shaken back and forth. This was not just shaking the tree. The branches were grasped as though with two hands and flailed back and forth. When it let go of them, they snapped back into place. This animal had to reach the 8-10 foot range at least and was brutally strong. While bears are very strong and do push on trees, their paws are not very suited to grasp two branches at once and push and pull them apart. Also, why would a bear going from running away to immediately stopping and shake the tree? I'm not saying that this is not possible, but doesn't seem probable. I did not see any other evidence, and due to the fact that I did not see the head of this thing, I stay openly skeptical, as I think everyone always should. But this is my story, and you can take it for what you wish. First, happy Thanksgiving to all my community members who live in the States. I did post a greeting, but this is just in case you didn't have the opportunity to see it. Second, I thought I'd try something a little bit different this time around and try not to yap as much in the beginning and just get to what we need to do. I'm going to continue to play around with it a little bit to see what fits better, but let me know your thoughts on that below. I'm always flabbergasted at the old encounters, like newspaper articles, which go back hundreds of years, where people are seeing these wild people or wild men. I always find the newspaper articles tell the story in such a beautiful, picturesque way. It's almost like poetry in how they write. They did definitely have a flair back then with the words that they chose. But how descriptive were some of these encounters? One being in the States and the other one being in Pembroke, Ontario. The other interesting part is one of the articles stated that the man was covered in hair all over the body except for the face. Very interesting. I guess the gorilla comment comes in because they have hair all over their body, and that is similar to a gorilla. But obviously the face and body structure was more of a man. The last two encounters were very interesting as well, especially the last one, the lady on the horse. Did the horse maybe attract the Sasquatch? Not sure, but very interesting encounter nonetheless. Okay, so that's going to be it for today. If these stories reminded you of an encounter that you may have had and would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCryptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story on this channel. Thank you guys for listening until the end. I truly appreciate it. Please hit the like button on your way out and smash that subscribe button if you're new to my channel. And also, don't forget to hit that notification bell. That way you can stay up to date with all my latest uploads, including when I go live. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you all next week right here on Ontario Cryptids.